In this video, we're going to take a look at working with clips in Ableton Live. So here you can see I'm in session view for Ableton Live, and I have all these clips, and they're in different tracks. So in these tracks, only one clip at a time can play. So I could, for instance, trigger this clip, and then this one. Now they're basically the same clip. There might be some variations here and there, but this is essentially one track, and you can only play one clip at a time from it. Now, if we want to add other clips, right, we can trigger them across this sort of spreadsheet view. So if I want to add this clap in, I can do that by triggering both clips. And I'm hitting this master stop all clips button here in the master channel. If I want to mix and match clips, I can do that. I could also launch entire scenes. A scene is a row of clips. So for instance, this row has this drum loop, this clap loop, a percussion loop, and a tambourine loop, and I can trigger that by going to the main channel here and clicking this arrow. If you notice, it did not play right away. It actually waited till the bar rolled around here in this main counter because the main counter was playing. That's a quantization feature called global quantization, and you can adjust that here in this setting. So if I want no global quantization, then the clips are going to play as soon as I click them. If I want it to wait for 2 bars or 4 bars or like a half note or whatever, you can change the global quantization when the clips launch and when they stop right here. I keep it on 1 bar pretty much 100% of the time. Now let's take a look at the clip detail view. If I double click on a MIDI clip, it opens up a MIDI editor in the bottom of the window. I can drag that up and make it taller. You'll see MIDI notes, and you can tell they're MIDI notes because they are squares. These squares represent musical notes. If I were looking at audio waves, it would look quite different. So back to MIDI for a second here. A couple things to know about the MIDI editor. Number one, you can edit MIDI notes very easily. If I don't want these hi-hats here, I can just double click them, or I can select them and hit delete. And now they're gone. I'm going to undo those changes because I do want them. If I want to change these notes, I can drag them to a different instrument. If I want to change an entire row, I just click the piano key associated with that row, and I can drag them, or I can also use my arrow keys. And now it's going to sound like congas instead of hi-hats. So that's something you can do with MIDI that you can't really do with audio. So I'm going to undo those changes. And let's look at the grid here. So the grid is very flexible in Ableton Live. If I right click on it, you can see the grid settings here in the middle. And you can choose from an adaptive grid or a fixed grid. A fixed grid is exactly what it sounds like. If I want my grid increments to be in 16th notes, there they are. This is 1 E and 2 E and If you ever took band or choir or orchestra or something in school, maybe you heard that counting system. And so no matter what my zoom level is, those grid increments are going to stay the same. Conversely, I can use the adaptive grid, and it could be wide or it could be narrow, narrowest. I'm going to choose narrow. That's what I usually stick with. And the narrow grid has more increments, and then if I zoom in, and the way I'm zooming in, by the way, is to hover my mouse in the timeline here and then drag down, click and drag down, or drag up to zoom out. But as I zoom in and out, you'll see the grid lines change. The further in I zoom, the more grid lines there are, the finer the gradations. The more I zoom out, the fewer grid lines there are. I can't zoom out any further than this because this is a 1 bar clip and I'm already at the maximum level. Another thing to look at in the MIDI editor is at the bottom here, this velocity editor. So here I can drag this up and make it easier to see. These are velocity stems, and what these are basically how hard the note is played. That's a very simplistic explanation, but it's good to start with. And if I click and drag on this, you'll hear a difference in the volume level of the highlighted note. So it's like an individual volume control for the note. Now, it can also have differences in the timbre of the instrument, or different velocities can trigger different samples in a sample-based instrument. Velocity is quite complex, but for now, you can just think of it as like a volume thing. And then there's one more thing I want to show you about the MIDI editor before we look at the audio editor, and that's this blue button right here. So this is the MIDI editor preview button, and if it's on, then whenever I enter a note, I can hear it. Or if I delete it, I can hear it. Or if I move it, I can hear all those notes. If that's turned off, I can't hear it. I can still enter and edit. I just can't hear it until I hit playback. I will hear it on playback. So, there's reasons why you would want to hear it or not hear it, but just be aware that this button is here. So if you're entering MIDI notes and you're like, why can't I hear this? Turn that on, you'll be able to hear it. There are a lot more features of the MIDI editor that we'll check out, but that's all for now. In the next video, I'm going to show you the audio editor.